digestive system. Looking at this image, we're able to see a couple components of the digestive system. Here we have the esophagus that's tucked behind the rib cage. We have our stomach. We have the entry into our duodenum, which follows the small intestine and the large intestine. The digestive system is pretty complex. It's a tube that goes from the mouth to the anus. Let's do this. Digestion starts at the mouth. The mouth chews food and mixes the food with saliva. The mouth is known for mechanical digestion with just the chewing of the food. Salivary glands produce saliva. Salivas contain amylase. Remember, anything that ends in the suffix ase is an enzyme. So saliva contains a starch digesting enzyme known as amylase. Starch is a complex sugar. It's polysaccharide. And the saliva is going to break the starch down into more simpler sugars like glucose. Saliva would be known as chemical digestion. From here we have the tongue. The tongue's located in the mouth, and the tongue helps push back food into the throat or the pharynx. Next we have the epiglottis. Epiglottis keeps food and fluid from moving into the larynx or the trachea. Last week we looked at glottis of the frog, and the glottis and even the epiglottis is attached to your trachea, and your trachea is attached to your lungs. The epiglottis closes as food travels past it, so the food or the fluid does not get into your trachea or your lungs. Next we have the esophagus. The esophagus is a thin muscular tube that is lined with mucus. The muscles contract to move food from one end to another, and the esophagus, because of the contraction and the mucus-lined walls, it's going to be mechanical and chemical digestion. From the esophagus, we are now in the stomach. The stomach is a muscular pouch that could hold 1 to 3 liters of food. The walls of the stomach are lined with mucus to protect the stomach walls from acid. The stomach mixes and churns food with gastric juices that contain acid. Therefore, the contraction, the churn, is going to be mechanical, and the gastric juices and the acidity of the stomach is going to be chemical digestion. From here, we have like accessory organs. We have the liver. Food doesn't travel to the liver, but the liver makes bile, which aids in the digestion and absorption of fat. We have the pancreas, another accessory. The pancreas produces enzymes that digest carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And the pancreas makes a hormone known as insulin, which helps control blood sugar levels. If one has diabetes, they're required to eat a low sugar, low carbohydrate diet. Insulin monitors blood sugar levels. So if there's a spike in blood sugar, pancreas makes insulin, which lowers the blood sugar. Diabetics, they can regulate their blood sugar, therefore they have to take insulin manually. Next we have the gallbladder. The gallbladder stores bile and releases it into the small intestine when needed. So we can see the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas are all connected by a vessel here. This vessel goes into the duodenum. Duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. Duodenum is a muscular tube that is lined with what is known as villi. The villi are shown here. As you see this wall, this is your intestinal wall. Everything on this side would be outside of the intestinal tract. The villi are these individual tiny fingers that allow nutrients and water to pass through the walls of the duodenum. These individual dots are going to be cells, and then this internal structure is going to be your lymphatic system and your capillaries. Now, these villi are the small intestine's way of increasing the surface area, thus coming in maximum contact with the food we eat, enhancing nutrient absorption. You have to think of the small intestine and the duodenum as a tube, but not a tube like a garden hose to where it's smooth on the inside. The duodenum and the small intestines have these tiny like fingers because it's a area to increase surface area. More surface area, then more diffusion could happen. And what is diffusion? The random motion of molecules from an area high concentration to an area low concentration. We looked at this when we looked at dialysis tubing. As we see, we have a semi-permeable membrane. Our intestine and duodenum is set up the same exact way. Certain substances cannot pass through, but others like vitamins, minerals, and water are able to diffuse through from an area high concentration to an area low concentration. That high concentration area would be where the food passes in, the inside of the small intestine, and diffusion would happen across into the cells. Now, here's a picture of our gastrointestinal tract. If I were to take the small intestine, cut it, this is what that garden hose tube will look like. But as you see, it's not smooth. You have all these finger waves in it filled with villi. The villi on the end of the villi or surrounding the villi, you're going to have cells. The cells contain nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosome, Golgi body, and on the top of the cell, you have even more increased surface area because now you have microvilli. When diffusion happens, these items, water, minerals, vitamins, they're going to diffuse into the cell. And then these minerals, water, and vitamins, they're going to then diffuse into our bloodstream. So this is where the cardiovascular system comes into play. We have to look at this area here, the area that goes from your artery coming off of the heart that has oxygenated blood to our body cells and our organs, to the vein that carries deoxygenated blood back to the heart. This loop is known as your systemic loop. Your systemic loop is made up of your aorta, which has oxygen-rich blood, bringing oxygen to our body cells and organs. And then there's an exchange happening, and then that exchange follows its way to the vena cava. In this exchange, we have our capillaries here. So capillaries will come off of the aorta, off of our arteries, and we have oxygen-rich blood traveling to all of our cells. So it's dropping off oxygen, but in the meantime, it's picking up glucose, amino acids, carbon dioxide, and then this here is going to our vena cava. This capillary will meet to our vena cava, and we will carry those nutrients, glucose, amino acids, through our body, and carbon dioxide will go through our heart and then pumped out through our lungs and exhale. These loops work together. As we inhale, we have oxygen coming in, oxygen-rich blood, and that oxygen-rich blood is going to go to our body cells. So it's a continuous loop. From the duodenum, we're going to get into the small intestine. The small intestine is where a lot of the absorption of nutrients is going to happen because it is very long and it's packed with villi on the inside. Small intestines are roughly about 6 meters in length. Villi are along the walls and absorb nutrients and water. Small food molecules are usually absorbed in the small intestine, diffusing across the intestinal wall and into the bloodstream. From here we have the appendix. The appendix acts as a storage site for good bacteria. One could develop appendicitis. So appendicitis is when this bacteria become trapped in the appendix. So there's going to be a blockage. But what we know about the reproduction rate of bacteria is that they multiply, and they multiply and reproduce very fast. So the appendix could only hold so much. If there's too much bacteria, the appendix will rupture, you'll get sick, and then you have to get your appendix removed. And that's fine, you can live without it. From the appendix, we have the large intestine or the colon. The large intestine is responsible for absorbing water, vitamins, and minerals. If the large intestine does not absorb any water, then you result in diarrhea. If the large intestine absorbs too much water, that's when you get constipated and it's hard to pass your stool. Out of the large intestine, we have the rectum and then the anus. The rectum stores and compacts waste before it is eliminated through an opening called the anus. And we'll play this video. This video, person's eating a piece of pizza. We have mechanical digestion of chewing. we have chemical digestion of your salivary glands. Here we have the epiglottis closing to protect our trachea and our lungs, and the food goes down our esophagus, being pushed down mechanically and a mucus lined chemically. The food is in our stomach now, and it's going to get break down by the intestinal juices, passes the duodenum, and the food is going to enter our intestines. In our intestines, we have a lot of absorption of minerals happening. With this absorption in our intestines, the minerals are going to diffuse into the villi, into our body cells, and then before you know it, it's going to diffuse into our bloodstream. The waste at this point is going to travel into our large intestine. Water, some remaining vitamins, minerals are going to get pulled, and then you pass it through your rectum where stool is going to get compacted, and then it goes out of your anus.